Subscribe to Betmeadate on YouTube for more dating challenges that can be tough to overcome, for videos every Sunday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Jaime Zuckerman about dating a narcissist. What do you do if you find out you're dating one? What do you do to not get back into relationships with narcissists? How do you handle this stuff? My name is Dr. Aviva Gaskill. I'm a clinical psychologist who's helped dozens of patients overcome dating challenges, but I can't do this work alone. I do it with the support and the help of experts like Dr. Jaime Zuckerman.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Jaime Zuckerman about dating a narcissist, which is a hot topic in 2021. Welcome, Dr. Zuckerman. Can you tell us a little bit about you and your work?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I am a clinical psychologist outside of Ardmore. I'm in private practice, and I specialize in adults with anxiety, depression, relationship issues, everyday stress. And I also have a subspecialty in clinical health psychology. So I see patients who are adjusting to medical illnesses and helping them kind of through that process. I tend to see a lot of neurological issues, like epilepsy and MS, and work with them on kind of coping with that throughout their life.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about narcissists. What is a narcissist? What are some traits or actions of a narcissist? Red flags, like how do you spot them from 10 miles away?
Yeah, so I think first it's important to recognize that there's a very big difference between somebody who has narcissistic personality disorder versus somebody who has narcissistic features, or what we call narcissistic traits. Every single one of us, to some degree, has some narcissistic traits. People who are in positions of power, positions of authority, tend to get into those positions because they have some more narcissistic traits, let's say, than other people, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
And
right. We talk about like a healthy level of narcissism.
Yes, a healthy level of narcissism, correct. And, like anything else, it's in moderation. And if you look at narcissism on a continuum, and here, let's say, is more of a dependency style, needing to need somebody else, needing to take care of somebody else, putting your own needs second. And then here is a total unawareness of, or lack of awareness of, your relation to other people in terms of their needs and the impact that your behavior has on other people. So people with narcissistic traits kind of fluctuate on this continuum. It's a lot of times the result of stress. Sometimes the more stressed people are, the more their narcissistic traits will come out. And so people with a true narcissistic personality disorder, and I get this question a lot, I'm sure you do too. Yeah. How do I know if my significant other or my ex, has a narcissistic personality disorder? And here's the thing. Rarely will it ever be something that is diagnosed, because people with narcissistic personality disorder rarely come to treatment. And that's because they don't think anything is wrong with them. And if they do, they don't care. Yeah. So there's nothing about them that needs fixing. And it's everybody else around them. So oftentimes what happens is I will be seeing a patient, and they'll ask if they can bring their significant other in for a session or two. And I say, okay. And it's then that I can, pretty quickly, based on what they've been telling me and my impression of them, be able to, to identify that, at least the possibility of them having that. But as far as them going to treatment for narcissistic personality disorder and having that be a true clinical diagnosis on a piece of paper is very rare. Yeah. Just for the sole fact they don't come into treatment. So if they do, it's usually for secondary substance abuse, and they'll get treatment for that, or they'll come in for suicidal ideation, they'll get treatment for that. But that's kind of where it stops after that. So red flags, meaning things that we can see ahead of time. Let's say if we start dating somebody, or we're starting to get to know somebody, even if it's a friend or a colleague or a boss, or even one of your employees. Things like, very subtle things like, how do they treat waiters and waitresses when you're out to dinner with them? Are they condescending? Are they demanding? Are they rude for no reason? How do they treat customer service when they call on the phone, when you're on the phone with Verizon or Comcast and everybody wants to pull their hair out?
Mhm.
How do they actually respond to them? Do they have a lot of friends?
Yes.
Do they have close friends, or
Mhm.
do they have a lot of acquaintances?
Mhm.
Do they tend to call all their exes crazy? Do
Mhm.
they tend to play the victim in terms of all their past relationships and why they didn't work out? Those are things that are red flags. If you're in a conversation with them, you're getting to know them, and they ask you 0 questions about yourself. Or they pretend to listen. You go on date number 2, and they don't remember anything about you
Mhm.
because they didn't care. They were just kind of putting on this act to ask you to act like they care. The other big thing, and this is where people get sucked in the most, is when you start dating somebody who has a narcissistic personality, they will immediately start what we call love bombing you, which is just pouring themselves immediately into this relationship. You are talking all the time. If the word soulmate comes up within the first couple of weeks, run.
Yes.
If they say, I've never met anyone like you, you're perfect for me, it's us against the world, that us against the world mentality is very,
Mhm.
very dangerous, for the sole reason being that they start to implement that in your mind as a way to start to isolate you and begin the process of isolating you slowly from your friends and family, which you don't realize is happening. But after a while, you'll realize you haven't spoken to anyone in a very long time.
Mhm.
Things like they met your parents for the first time, or they met your best friend for the first time and say, I don't know about her. There's something about her I don't really trust. To start to kind of make you doubt your perceptions of others and
Yeah.
start to make you doubt your reality of, the world around you that you've known for so long. So those are some things that you want to really pay close attention to.
Yeah, that's great. And so what do you do if you're already dating someone who does have narcissistic personality disorder? What do you do? Like, how do you handle it?
So a lot of times people who ignore those red flags or don't see them, either they don't see them because they love the attention, they're not used to that. And usually narcissists will tend to gravitate towards people who are very vulnerable, going through a very vulnerable time in their life, like a single mom, let's say, or somebody that financially is really not doing well and needs financial security. So people that tend to ignore those red flags or not see them, or familiar patterns that they're used to that, so they kind of gravitate towards that. They end up getting into it and getting over their heads
Yeah.
before they're able to stop it.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily understand that the person is a narcissist because everything about the relationship tends to be very secretive. So this person's super charming when they're out at functions and out to dinner and to family members, and you'll find the family members love them, and the friends love them. And then you start to see this other side of them, and no one else understands, and they may say to you, oh, he's just in a mood, he's working really hard, he's having difficulty at work, or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
So your concerns initially aren't validated, and so you're made to
Mhm.
feel like you're overreacting, or you're crazy, or
Mhm.
you're needy, or you're clingy. And so it takes a really long time for people in those types of relationships to really have that aha moment of,
Yeah.
oh my God, because it's very quiet and secretive. It's not until they start to hear other people's stories, which is why stuff like this is so important.
Yeah.
It's not until they or maybe are in therapy because their significant other told them they're crazy, you need therapy, you need medication, you're out of your mind, blah, blah, blah. So they
Mhm.
go into therapy, and a therapist works with them and sees this usually dependent, narcissistic, toxic dynamic. Because that's, as you know, that's probably one of the most difficult dynamics to get somebody out of,
Yeah. Or
because
they'll tell you you're crazy, but you shouldn't go to therapy
correct, because
sometimes
they'll
too.
uncover them,
Mhm.
right? They'll
Right.
figure them out.
Right.
So it's really difficult to figure that out. And then once they do figure that out, then it's the whole issue of, at that point, and people will tell you this, they feel like they're a shell of who they once were. They have no identity. They don't even know their favorite color anymore. They don't know their favorite kind of music. They've really lost their sense of self. It is buried so far deep. And so it's really getting them to a point where they can kind of recover that sense of self, reconnect to people slowly outside. It's a very deliberate process to get somebody away from a narcissist. It is not easy. It is not fast. You'll have people say, why doesn't she just leave him? Or why doesn't he just leave her? Because a lot of times there's abuse. There's threatening of the children if there's custody involved, financial threatening. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes. So it's not easy. It's not a normal breakup.
Yeah, it can feel or actually be dangerous.
Yes, exactly. And so you have to be very, very careful and have a lot of resources in place before you really work with someone to leave that relationship. So it's a slow build up. It's a slow progression. And eventually when they get to the point where they have enough confidence to know they will not go back. I tell people, if you feel you're going to go back, let's wait a little bit longer, assuming it's not dangerous. Let's kind of wait a little bit longer and really kind of get you to a place where when you leave, you kind of have that certainty that this is it. Because a lot of times people leave, go back, and that intermittent dynamic just makes it so much harder to get out of.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Stick around for more of Dr. Zuckerman's insights on people who she's helped overcome challenges with dating narcissists.
How do people who have finally gotten out of a relationship with someone who's a narcissist, how do they break the pattern so they don't keep going back to relationships with more narcissists over and over and over again and repeat that pattern?
Therapy, honestly, therapy, because you're not going to do this alone. You are going to go back into, more likely than not, the same unhealthy patterns. Again, it's if I tell somebody, like, they're left-handed and I tell them, you can't use your left hand anymore, you have to use your right hand, they're okay with that. But if I tell them they have to sign their name 50 times before their house burns down, they're not going to use their right hand. They're going to go back to their left hand because that's familiar and comfortable. So, and it gets the job done quick. So when they're stressed, when they're anxious, when they're lonely, when they're depressed, because that may happen after a breakup, they may tend to go back to old patterns because it connects them to people quickly with that love bombing, but it's not healthy. So therapy, because a lot of it is going to be tolerating the discomfort of being on your own, emotionally independent, and your self-worth not being contingent on somebody else. So that's super important to not get back into those patterns. So therapy, I cannot stress that enough, so that you don't repeat these patterns. Family members can help, but only to a certain extent, because it's likely that, not intentionally, not with any type of malicious intent, they're likely part of the reason why that unhealthy pattern exists in the first place, whether they realize it or not, the enabling of certain behaviors. So you have to be careful depending on people part of your support network for that specific purpose. For emotional support, of course, but for helping you identify patterns like that, it may be a little bit difficult.
Well, yeah, and I think sometimes, like a narcissistic mother or father might be the reason someone is drawn to a narcissistic partner, and yet they're jealous of the narcissistic partner, and vice versa, which is a whole other.
It's a whole thing. And that's where the attempts to isolate them from family members comes into play. Because if there's a narcissistic parent, right, then there's the competition. And if there is a parent who, let's say, is a former partner of a narcissist, or knows how a narcissist is for whatever reasons, or just knows their behavior doesn't make sense, they're an enemy to that person, and the narcissist is going to do whatever they can to block their significant other from that person.
So what are some, if there are friends and family that want to be helpful, that want to be supportive, and that see this pattern, how do they excuse me, how do they join, and sort of, what are some things that they might be telling you or sharing with you that could be, again, like red flags for you, or things that you notice when they've said it that maybe you haven't noticed for yourself?
When people are trying to help you get out of this?
Yeah.
Things like he's under stress. She's just under stress. Give it time. They're a really good person. They mean well. Your father was like that to me and I hung in there, and we're fine when they're not, or he had a really difficult upbringing. I keep saying he because I see mostly women, but she had a really difficult upbringing. She went through a lot of rough patches. Just hang in there. They really do mean well. They really do love you. That kind of stuff.
And what about when they see the other person's a narcissist too? Like, what if my best friend, I'm dating a narcissist and my best friend is like, Aviva, like, doesn't seem like a great one.
So, so being a psychologist, what do you do, or a non-psychologist friends?
A non-psychologist, what would it?
Yeah. So I think it's really helpful to not come across in an accusatory way, because it's likely that your friend doesn't realize the pattern. So what's very obvious to people on the outside is really not obvious to someone on the inside, especially if they have that, like I said, kind of that dependency feature about them. You want to make sure that you let them know that you're supporting them and you're going to be there for them no matter what. You're just concerned for them because you love them and you want the best for them, which is true. And you can say, this is so hard for me to say to you because I know you really care about them. And I don't want you to think that I don't want you to be happy, because what will happen is your friend is absolutely, if they're already so entwined this, it's going to come out somehow, because I guarantee you their partner already knows that as the friend, you're the enemy friend.
Yeah.
And so that person like already has in their mind, don't trust Jaime. She's just jealous. She's a man hater. She's just jealous of our relationship because, she just got out of a breakup or whatever the case may be. And that your friend, there's a part of them that may really kind of believe that, because they're, like I said, their sense of self is not where it could be.
Yeah.
And their sense of the world around them has been really just shifted.
Yeah.
So it's important to come at them in a very supportive, a very kind of just open-minded way, and go into it as the friend telling them that you telling them this cannot, there can be no part of your telling them that has the intention of getting them to understand you.
Yeah.
You need to tell them this to get this off your chest. There is no part of it that should be trying to get them to get it, because they're not. They will never believe you until they start to see it for themselves.
Yeah.
But the more people that can kind of start to plant these seeds, the better. And if you come at them in a defensively, like, what the hell is wrong with you? You're so stupid. You just did it. Why are you in this? And can't you see? It's going to have the absolute opposite effect on them.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's just going to separate you as friends.
And you don't want to do that, because you also don't want to close the line of communication between you and your friends, because God forbid any abuse starts, or God forbid anything happens and they need to tell somebody. You don't want to be blocked from them. You want to leave that line of communication open so you can help them. So keep that in mind too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such good, helpful advice too. Like, I've had patients who've left, abusers, whether they were narcissists or not. And
that's another point, not to interrupt you, just because somebody, I don't mean just, but if somebody is abusive, that does not mean they have narcissistic personality disorder. So keep that in mind too.
Yeah, they can be separate things. And so, it has been the non-judgmental friends and family who they've gone back
That was the
to.
word I couldn't think of. Non-judgmental. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So any other final tips for us on, what to do, how to manage this? Any final thoughts?
So, at a certain point, if you're in that type of relationship and you start to feel like you're losing your voice, or you start to feel like you're doing things to control the other person's emotions out of fear or not wanting to upset them, if you start to feel like you're walking on eggshells, that is something I call that kind of like a middle of the relationship red flag.
Yeah.
So you won't see that in the beginning because they're on their best behavior and they are just charming the pants off of you.
Yeah.
And then when you're over here, it's like someone literally has to like pull you out of this somehow.
Yeah.
But that middle of the road is the walking on eggshells. When you start to realize that you are doing things, lying by omission, just kind of doing things to not trigger them. That's the start of when, that devaluing stage, when they're starting to make you feel a little bad, starting to make you doubt yourself a little bit. And most of your behaviors are guided towards not wanting to anger them, right? Or not wanting to upset them. Problem is that you could cook them breakfast one day and they love it. You cook them the same exact breakfast the next day and they throw it against the wall and say that it's crap. And you're kind of like, then you're perfecting your eggs and you're in the kitchen for 30 minutes going, how did I get here? So it's that middle of the road things that you really want to start to look for. And I we all call it kind of walking on eggshells. So that's another thing I think is really important. And to know that when you get out of a relationship like this, as depressed and anxious as you will feel, as beaten down and as low as your self-esteem may be, understand too that you just did something so significant and you just did something that a lot of people can't do. And that you should be, as scary as it is, you should be really proud of yourself because it takes a lot of courage to leave a relationship like that.
Yeah, truly. Thank you so much for
Sure.
talking to us today. Where can people who are interested in finding out more about you and your practice and your work find you?
So I have a website, drjaimezuckerman.com, JaimeZuckerman. And my Instagram page, I post a lot of stuff on relationships and toxic narcissistic dynamics. And that is Dr. Zuckerman. So you can find me there. Also, there's a link to my Instagram, my Facebook page on my actual website. If you scroll down to the bottom, you can find it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Don't forget to check us out on betmeadate.com to meet all of your dating goals. And don't forget to click that like, subscribe, and check out more of our video content on YouTube from Betmeadate.